the organized program, gender diversity capability workshops, a toolkit of way forward guides, specialist webinars like this one today, and a few more. AWRA also provides individual support to women working across Australia's vast resource industry in both professional corporate roles and those out in the field through the AWRA e-mentoring program. The agenda for today's webinar is myself giving you an overview of flexible work practices and some tips on implementation of the different types of strategies, as well as introduce you to AWRA's Guide to Flexible Work. This will be followed by Tom Hatch, Manager National and Strategic Sales of National Recruitment Agency DFP Recruitment, who will unpack the statistics and trends around workplace flexibility in the Australian resource and related sectors. Robert Van Stockron, the CEO of DFP Recruitment, sends his sincere apologies for not being able to present this afternoon. Following Tom, Yolanda Beatty, Executive Manager Public Affairs with the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, will talk about the proven flexible work strategies and how businesses can maximize the benefits through improved productivity and performance. If you do have any questions throughout the presentations, please type them in the questions box and I will ask them on your behalf at the end of the presentation. Flexible work. Increasingly, more and more employees are seeing how a flexible career helps them build a career as they see it fit, their personal obligations, a career by design. The growing popularity of flexible work practices and careers are based on the employer's need to retain talent as well as to reduce costs, and employees' desire for greater variety and flexibility in their careers and personal lives. The younger generation of talent is actively seeking more variety than the older generations in their career and work employment portfolio. In fact, recent research by Ardent predicted that by the end of 2017, nearly 45% of the world's total workforce will be comprised of contingent workers, including independent contractors and freelancers. According to the Randstad World of Work report for 2013-2014, many Australian employees understand the benefits of flexible working strategies, with 41% believing it boosts employee engagement and satisfaction, and that employees want a more flexible approach to work, with most stating their ideal working arrangement would involve spending 70% of their time in the office and 30% working remotely. So what is preventing more Australian businesses from implementing flexible work practices? We've identified two major reasons. One is a lack of trust or know-how, and the other is concerns over whether organizations can continue to deliver high-quality service with such arrangements. Following on from the changes to the Fair Work Act 2010, best practice employees have put processes in place that ensure their responses and management of flexible work options meet the requirements of the legislation, are non-discriminatory, and address the needs of the business and all its employees. Bottom line, employees need to consider workplace flexibility to be a critical component of any attraction and retention strategy. Flexibility in where, when and how work is performed by employees needs to be given priority if employers are to attract and retain quality staff, and this needs to be done soon. Businesses will be left out in the cold if they wait until 2017 to embrace this fundamental shift in employment and staffing. So here are some types of flexible work arrangements. Part-time work, reduced hours, casual work, job sharing, ROWE, flex place, telecommuting, compressed working hours, purchased leave, expanded leave, shift work, phased retirement, and these are only a few to mention. So when thinking of applying any of these or other types of arrangements, ask yourself whether it is suitable for your employee, you as their manager, your team, your company, and your clients. As much as implementing flexible work arrangements within your organization is beneficial for you as an employer and for your employees, it can be challenging at times. So here are our 8 commandments to assist you through this process as an employer and as a manager. Focus on outputs and think of jobs in terms of roles, performance, and tasks. Lead by example. Challenge your own views on flexibility. View the needs of an employee in a holistic way and flexibility from a broad perspective. Take opportunities to be proactive with flexibility. Encourage and communicate flexible work options. Advertise flexibility, so throughout your organization in roles that you are advertising for encouraging. Comply with legislative requirements. More information on the resource industry-specific flexible work strategies, case studies, cost and benefit analysis of flexible work practices can be found in AWRA's Guide to Flexible Work. This is a source of information that we are proud to bring to AMA and AWRA members, as well as resources related to construction and allied services sector organizations later this year. So please stay tuned on our website, www.awra.org.au, and through our social media to find out how you can get access to a copy. With this in mind, I will now pass on to Tom from DFP Recruitment to give you a realistic picture on flexible work practices in Australia and around the world.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that, Adriana. Hopefully you've got my presentation up there now, Adriana.
Yeah, we can see it now. Thanks, Tom.
Terrific. Okay, yes. Hello, everyone. Tom Hatch here, National Sales Manager with DFP Recruitment. My involvement today in the session is to, really provide some details on the research that we've conducted over the past 2 years, specifically related to employment in the Australian mining and resources sector. And I can do this today by sharing an overview of our Mining and Resources Job Index and some of the research that's come from that. And there's also an opportunity to look at some of the international data, some of the global trends in employment and implications that they have for employers, governments, employees, and I guess they're all various stakeholders in the employment market, and how some of this data and trends may help us in considering our approach with future employment practices. Just before I move on to that, though, just to give you a high-level overview of DFP and who we are for those that aren't familiar. We're a staffing solutions specialist. We provide temporary and permanent recruitment services. We're an Australian company, been in operation for 34 years and 16 branches around the country. And just as it is up on the screen there, some of the key sectors we recruit across include the commercial, corporate, professional roles in the private sector. We do recruit for all levels of government. And obviously while we're here today, we have a mining and resources specialist division as well, where we particularly have a strong presence throughout Western Australia. To complement the work we do in the mining and resources sector, we commissioned a research specialist to conduct research on our behalf that measures job vacancy data in mining and resources, and specific to that industry. It's the first of its kind. We started this research just over 2 years ago. It uses artificial intelligence to really break down the big employment data that's out there. And we release this research monthly. It allows those with an interest in Australian mining and resources employment to analyse the various trends across the national landscape. It looks into state proportions and state market share. It breaks down sub-sector analysis, so it compares data from the coal and mineral mining, oil and gas, metal ore mining, exploration and mining services. It goes on to look at occupational group analysis as well, and it drills down to operations management, engineering professions, trades and operators, and further drills further down into the various occupations under all of those types of categories. I guess importantly, the data just enables us to follow and analyse the various market trends and also do some comparisons out there, such as comparing the national index against the RBA's commodity price index, which has really been interesting over the last couple of years. Just to look at some of the key trends. I guess the first point there, or the first couple of points I've just highlighted there, without going into too much detail, probably no major surprise there. In the first 6 months of 2015, the number of vacancies advertised has fallen 22.1% and 34.9% in the last 12 months. Whilst Queensland started experiencing some significant falls probably 12 months, 2 years ago, Western Australia certainly caught up in the decline in job advertising. The West Australian index has fallen 39.4% and Queensland by 17.4% over the past 12 months. To sort of bring some sort of positive, if we can, in what typically over the last 12 months has been some pretty doomy and gloomy sort of statistics. One positive is that falls in permanent vacancies has shown some sort of stabilisation and has only fallen sort of 2.1% over the last quarter. A bit of a snapshot of some of the disciplines that we look at and subsectors and some of the trends that's been seen there. I guess, again, probably no real surprise, but with the shift from construction to production phase, the contraction of jobs has been less severe for production-related jobs such as trades and operators. I guess, 12 months, 2 years ago, we were predicting and hoping, predicting that with coal and iron ore sectors being hardest hit, it was hoped that oil and gas sector would set up some of the scaling back in other sectors. However, unfortunately, we haven't seen this through the results, and growth has just failed to materialise in that area, and oil and gas itself, which was a bit of a hope, has really experienced falls of 37% over the past 6 months. And just to look at one occupational classification without drilling down into too many right now, with exploration investment down, it's seen roles such as geologists and roles for exploration specialists down 35% in the last year. Got plenty more statistics, relating to employment in the Resources Job Index, and you're all welcome to get copies of that. As I said, we do get it out monthly. If you'd like to get it, we produce it complimentary. You can get it on a monthly basis. It'll be sent to you. You can either two ways. You can just register on our website your details and it'll be sent to you. As I said, it is complimentary. And I'll also share my email details at the end of today's presentation, and by all means you can just email me a note if that's easier, and I'm happy to make sure you get a copy on a monthly basis. Just now to bring to the table some data and trends that we're aware of in the international stage that have some implications for the global employment market, and hopefully it complements some of the statistics that Adriana started off with. But yeah, on an international stage, and as you can see, in 1980 there was 1 billion people worldwide were of working age in that 15 to 64 years of age category. In 2010 that became 3.2 billion people worldwide were of working age. And in 2020 the prediction is that 2.5 billion people will be of working age, with 40% of these in India and China alone. In delving further into some of the global statistics, I guess we just raised the point that there's a disconnect between people and jobs. A 2015 McKinsey survey of 37,000 employers globally found that 36% of employers couldn't find the talent that they needed. And it also found that 30 to 45% of the global working age go underutilised, meaning they're unemployed, inactive or work part-time. And 75 million youth are officially unemployed, and hundreds of millions more inactive, meaning they're not involved in education, employment or training. I guess when trying to understand flexible talent, what it means, I guess a global mobile workforce is made up of digitalisation, mobility, and 24/7, 365 days per year mentality. implicating that there's lots of new factors that need to be considered when looking at maintaining, retaining, building workforces, and looking to attract talent. And I guess what we put up here is that the new workplace needs to align to the new workforce. The new workforce takes into consideration globalisation, ageing populations, self-centeredness. I guess we're all aware of the "what about me" and "what's in it for me" mentality. Diversity, obviously, as Adriana has alluded to. Hyperconnectivity in that sort of the digital networking age that we live in today. Disengagement and the importance of engaged workforces, and the remote and dispersed environments, which I'm going to delve into a little bit further later on. I think we all understand, and it's fair to say, that the work-life mix is not what it used to be. And in fact, the whole concept of work-life balance could even be seen to be superseded or a little outdated. We can see many of us, our colleagues and our employers, view the work-life mix a little bit differently than we did, here we're sort of saying decades ago, but really even view it a little more differently than we did a decade ago. The pace of change and factors such as digitalisation has no doubt changed the landscape significantly. And I guess with the slide here highlighting somewhat of a shift from work intruding our private life to a life that sees us blending our own worlds together, or our work life and our private life together. In a location, that really, as this slide sort of indicates, putting our work life in a location that could be, well, anywhere. And that's what I'm just going to have a look into now, and some of the global sort of statistics. In looking at the remote workplace, I mean, some of the global numbers indicate the following in some of the various regions throughout the world. So 29% of workers in Japan are doing remote work. That's 28% in the USA and 18% in the European Union. And again, sort of keeping with the theme of just looking elsewhere around what's happening around the world, around that whole sort of de-standardisation of employment and working conditions. In Europe, there's 15% of workers are self-employed. That's 33 million people. In France, 1 out of 3 workers have, unconventional non-9-to-5 sort of working times. And in the Netherlands, 46% of employees actually work part-time. I guess in consideration and how we compare to the rest of the world specific to the mining sector, when comparing something such as global mining salaries, we can see that we come in well above competitors around the world, and maybe surprisingly for some, or not so surprisingly for others, still significantly ahead of our friends in Canada and the US even. I guess, which really, as well as sharing some of the local stats and some of those international stats, I guess what it brings us to, and the point we're putting on the table today, is that whole issue of global competitiveness. I guess, no doubt this is an audience that understands there's a lot of moving parts in increasing our competitiveness on the global stage, and much of it is to do with workplace flexibility. I guess the message we feel is important and critical is that we need sustained efforts in developing a collaborative approach between all stakeholders. It's about having our government, our unions, our employers, our labour force and our industry groups all coming together in a collaborative sort of forum rather than a confrontational forum to make sure that we get the investment and improvement in our economy and an increase in jobs, which I'm assuming that it's an outcome that no doubt all of us here sort of today hope for. So hopefully there's a mix of some local industry-specific research and data, some global employment statistics and trends, and I guess just through a combination through some of our experience dealing with employers and employees, there's some food for thought on the table around looking at flexible work practices. And as I mentioned earlier, if anybody did want to get hold of some of that research that we do have, and in particular our Mining and Resources Job Index, really happy to share it, so don't hesitate in getting in touch or going through our website. Adriana?
Thank you for that, Tom. It was a very eye-opening presentation, especially in terms of the statistics, and I hope everyone found that really useful as well. I will now pass on to Yolanda from the Workplace Gender Equality Agency, to talk further about this very interesting topic. Thanks, Yolanda. I'll just switch over to your presentation now.
Great, thanks Adriana. And thank you everybody for joining in on the call today, and a big congratulations to AWRA and AWRA for this initiative. I'm just going to click on show my screen. Okay, great. Can everybody see that screen now? Adriana, I'm assuming you can see all of that. So what I'd like to cover today is an overview of the agency for those who don't know us, and when we've done a bit of a look at what companies were represented on the call today, we can see there's a few of you that don't report to us. So I'll give you a bit of an overview of who we are and give you a bit of a context of how the agency views gender strategies and the need to take a strategic approach in achieving gender equality and, of course, really any diversity and inclusion initiative, and where flexibility is positioned in that broader pursuit of diversity and inclusion. Talk a fair bit about flexibility both as a driver of productivity and performance, but then also our model for embedding and mainstreaming flexibility to maximise the productivity and performance outcomes for employers, before sharing with you our major campaign on flexibility, the Equilibrium Man Challenge. So for those who aren't familiar with us, we're a federal statutory agency. We sit in the Department of Employment. We're an independent agency with that's governed by a piece of legislation called the Workplace Gender Equality Act. And that gives us two roles that are overarching objective being to promote and improve gender equality in Australian workplaces. And we do that through our role as a regulator, where we collect data from employers in the non-public sector who employ 100 or more people. That data is collected across six standardised metrics, or otherwise known as gender equality indicators. And they're metrics that allow us to understand the composition of the workforce, gender pay gaps, and then the known strategies and policies that enable gender equality outcomes. And flexible working is one of those areas. We then take that data to provide customised, company-specific and confidential benchmarking reports to employers, so they can see and understand their gender equality performance against their peers and track their performance over time. And it's that data that enables them to inform much more targeted gender strategies in their areas of either greater strength or weakness. As an educator and influencer, we develop best practice methodologies and tools and resources to help employers put in place the strategies and practices that we know enable better gender equality outcomes, and then run public campaigns to help drive awareness in both the Australian public and then specifically with employers around the issues that inhibit progress on this area, and then of course painting what the business benefits are. So talking a little bit further about the importance of strategy when it comes to gender, and I make this point because the agency has a very clear view that one of the missing elements in employers' approach to gender equality and diversity more broadly to date has been a tendency to take a very programmatic approach to the issue. And this roadmap really maps out the stages of gender equality for most organisations. And that it's certainly not a linear trajectory. It's not that you necessarily start with avoiding the issue or just focusing on being compliant with the various pieces of legislation that intersect with this issue. But that often organisations will come understanding that it's something that needs to be done in the very least because there's a legislative requirement, whether it be through our legislation or sex discrimination legislation or indeed the Fair Work Act. But that then triggers a programmatic response where employers tend to adopt a piecemeal approach responding to an issue or a need to do something, but with limited understanding of really needing to embrace the systems and structures that create the issues in the first place, and instead tend to focus on programs that are targeted to women in the workplace or specific diversity groups. And that means employers often start with women's mentoring or network groups or perhaps a sponsorship program, and they fail to really deliver the lasting change and the lasting impact because they're not focusing on the big problems and the big issues. And what tends to happen is then progress is slow or not at all, and there can be a bit of a backlash as executives throw their hands in the air, frustrated by the lack of progress, and sometimes can drive inertia. So the methodology that we've developed around developing a gender strategy is designed to help employers fast track and avoid the programmatic, skip over from perhaps compliant straight to strategic or indeed integrated. And the methodology outlines a range of key focus areas employers need to investigate and interrogate through a detailed diagnosis phase, while also looking at some quick wins that can be achieved to keep momentum going. And then that diagnosis ensures that employers can put in place a 3 to 5 year strategy that really targets on the areas that are inhibiting the progress of women or other diverse groups in their workplace, and puts a robust process around that starts with the clear articulation of a business case that's specific to the organisation, underpinned by measurement reporting that allows the progress to be tracked, a clear view of the policies and procedures that really understands what are the various different control system or decision-making factors, influences or forums that might be inhibiting the progress of women in the workplace, and other areas such as supply chain, leader and management capability, talent pipeline, gender pay equity, and of course ultimately gender composition. So flexibility is a critical focus area as well, and so while it is certainly a focus area and probably an area that you can get some quick wins in for those that have that pressure from management to make some quick progress while the more detailed diagnosis is occurring, it's important that we consider flexibility as part of a broader gender strategy, if indeed that is what the organisation is looking to achieve, that broader diversity and inclusion agenda, and looking at that in obviously the context of productivity and performance. So I think the other point to make on this slide before I move on is that really our gender strategies methodology is about focusing on best practice human capital management. And it's about recognising the need to maximise engagement and productivity and discretionary effort of all of our employees. But it's also about recognising that there are certain groups that face very specific barriers that must be dismantled in order to really get the best out of everybody and achieve the meritocracy that all employers are looking to achieve. And obviously women are usually, for most workplaces, the largest group that are facing those specific barriers, and so are often the first target when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So looking now specifically at flexibility, this slide talks to the narrative that the agency sees as really being why flexibility is a key driver and enabler of productivity and performance. And that if we start looking at that, it's all the success of flexibility is about outputs and outcomes, and you can see that the AWRA methodology there is also has that at its heart. That if we design jobs and we design performance management and reward systems that recognise outputs and outcomes, then you're inevitably going to drive an increase in engagement, because it's moving away from this notion of presenteeism and time at the desk to what most people are driven and motivated by, and that's actually what they're achieving. That increase in engagement leads to reduced absenteeism, which is of course a real cost to employers, and it can help contribute to a reduction in that work-life conflict that Tom was talking about, that really then talks to how do we achieve this better work-life integration, where there isn't this view that work stops, life starts, work stops, but really seen as that the most engaged and committed and passionate employees are able to blend the two. And that leads to ultimately happier and healthier employees, and of course positively contributes to gender equality. So it's a fabulous virtuous cycle that has huge benefits for both the employer and employee. And a number of different research projects over the past decade or so have seen a fairly consistent trend in these metrics, where you can see a reduction in absenteeism, and in this particular study I quote here from the Council of Economic Advisors to the White House, found back in 2010 that in a study group they found a 20% reduction in absenteeism from the group that was working flexibly. And in this second piece of research that I point to here from Deloitte Access Economics, employees that had access to a flexible IT IT policy, which was about flexible working, as well as access to other social platforms that facilitated work and life, saw a stark difference in employee satisfaction for those that had access to that flexible IT policy versus those that didn't. And so I echo Adriana's comments that employers that aren't putting in place the strategies and policies and investing in the technology and training to enable flexible working and mainstreaming it for everyone will simply be left behind in the next decade, and probably those that aren't on the journey within the next 5 years will see themselves struggling to attract the talent and struggling to keep up with their competitors that have really made significant inroads in seeing this as a driver of workforce performance. So let's have a look at what we see out there in our data set of how employers are currently approaching this issue, and I'll caveat this to say that this is last year's data, so 13-14 data, and we'll be releasing this year's data at the end of November, so it will be interesting to see how far this particular topic has changed in the 12 months since employers last reported to us. But what we're seeing is that there is a significant take-up of flexible working policies at around 50%. So this is across 11,000 employers that report to us, representing about a third of the workforce. So it is a substantial census of a proportion of the market, of the Australian labour market. And so we can see that there's a high level of acceptance around the need for a flexible working arrangement policy, and that's probably driven significantly by the Fair Work legislation and the right to request flexibility, which has put it on the employer agenda as a need to at least have some rules and guidance around how the employer approaches it. But this policy-driven approach is really inadequate when it comes to the need to embed flexible working as the way that we work around here, given what we know is needed in terms of the change of attitudes and the change of behaviour for employers to really maximise that productivity and performance outcome, and really move flexible working away from being this token gesture to working mothers, and this view that flexible working is still seen as this transaction or this negotiation that happens between manager and employee, with all of the stigma attached to it that, again, Adriana referred to, and those barriers that need to be overcome to really achieve the attitude and behaviour change needed. And so it is somewhat disappointing to see that we only have about 13.6% of employers that have a flexible working strategy. But of course that presents significant opportunity because it looks to a low base that gives us plenty of room to move in terms of where to go here. And it's perhaps unsurprising that when we did a bit of a look at the organisations that were represented on the call today, that those of you that are on the call that we could see we're taking a very similar approach to the rest of the data set. So we have about half of you that have a policy only when it comes to flexible working. We have some of you that have a strategy, which is fantastic. And we have some of you that are obviously still coming to grips with it and haven't got a policy or a strategy yet, and some of you that are just on the early stages of under development. So again, this represents a fantastic opportunity for all of you on the call to really start having a look at how can you use flexibility as a critical driver of talent management and employee engagement. And I'm delighted to say that both the agency and obviously some of your industry-specific groups like AWRA and AWRA have a number of different resources that you can refer to for guidance. So talking a little bit further about how the agency approaches this issue from a methodology point of view and what we recommend as best practice when it comes to flexibility. This slide is fairly busy, so let me kind of step you through it and to say that we have a range of different tools and resources on our website that really map out this in a lot more detail. And so what this methodology does is it follows a very simple strategy process and step change process that starts with diagnosing where you are now and really mapping out a vision of where you want to be. It then points to what are the different leadership commitments that need to be in place over time to be able to really make this change. Designing what the best route is to get there, being really clear about what those goals and actions are, and then putting in place an implementation plan and a learning and review cycle throughout the whole process to ensure that the attitude and behaviour changes that are really needed are on track for change over time. And what I've mapped out underneath there, or what our methodology maps out underneath there, are the capability areas that we believe employers need to come to grips with to really achieve the productivity and performance benefits that are available with flexible working. And so if I can just talk to each of those in a little bit of detail now. Articulating a flexibility vision and strategy is a really critical starting point that ensures that the company has a view of how do we want to see flexibility supporting our workforce and supporting our business. How does it enable us to support our customers, support our revenue and growth targets, and so that you're able to very clearly articulate why this makes sense to you as a business, which leads to the next 2 points around the business case and the leadership commitment. And obviously the policy there is about setting rules and guidance, but it's really the strategy that's essential for mapping out how that policy is going to be enacted, what the goals are that you're trying to achieve and how you're going to achieve them. The next pillar of work, if you like, when it comes to the design and implementation phase in particular, looks at the various different considerations that you need to be looking into to really make flexible working a success and avoid the pitfalls and traps that so many employers we've seen fall into in the years when they've taken this more transaction or manager-employee driven approach to flex, and instead haven't really adopted this whole of organisation approach that we recommend in our methodology. So technology and infrastructure is obviously critical, and for some employers, and particularly no doubt in the metal and mining sector and allied industries where structurally the industry is going for a significant change, there's revenue squeeze and profit pressure. Investing in large technology and infrastructure projects are going to be challenging. However, there's a Rolls-Royce version of these things, as is always the case. But there are also smaller low-cost exercises that, for most employers, there's a basic investment already in place in whether it be conference call technology, video conferencing technology, or remote access. But certainly understanding what technology is available and how it can be used and accessed and unlocked to really enable different types of flexible working is critical. The next two areas around management capability and employee experience, as I've said previously, is really where we see most employers starting and most toolkits and resources focusing on. And what we're articulating in our methodology is they're obviously really critical capabilities, but they are only two in a much bigger piece that need to be looked at and addressed in order to really achieve what we're all trying to achieve when it comes to productivity and performance. But they are critical, and it's natural why most employers start in that area. And they are significant when you have a look at what's needed in terms of that attitude and behaviour change, because it is a different way of working. It is a different way of managing, and we have dedicated manager toolkits and employee toolkits to help employers really build up the skills to tackle that new era of management that really will see, as I said at the outset, employers and managers that aren't embracing flexibility as a way to work in 5 to 10 years will really be redundant in their style of working. And underpinning all of that is a results management approach, and that takes a significant thinking from an HR point of view in terms of how you might redesign jobs and performance management systems to ensure outcomes and outputs are measured, not time in the office. We often hear common complaints around client experience, and Adriana mentioned that as a critical objection that a lot of employers have around how client deliverables will be met. And so we have a very dedicated focus on and guidance on how to manage expectations and really use flexible working as a competitive advantage, not something to be hidden away from clients, but really seen as a way to drive client engagement. Critically underpinning all of this is both a change management and a learning cycle that sees experience and learning and modification happening throughout the process to ensure that we're mapping this step change, and you can really see and monitor progress over the time that you're rolling out the strategy, and indeed over the long term as you're continuing to review and refine it. So as I mentioned, we've got a whole range of tools on our website that can help you tackle flexibility in your workplace, with the readiness assessment being a really important starting point to get a sense of where you are on the flexibility roadmap, and therefore where your focus needs to be as you roll out and develop that strategy. In addition to these methodologies, we have a fantastic campaign that's targeting the biggest issue in many cases when it comes to making flexible working the norm for everybody, and that is the stigma that continues to exist around people that work flexibly, and this view that it's for working mums, it's not for men, it's what you do when you're taking the mummy track, it's a sign of being less committed to your career. It's code for I don't want to work as hard, or I'm looking for, I'm looking to coast. And so we've developed a campaign that's really designed to align flexibility with top performers who are trying to craft and drive the new way of working, that are seeing flexibility as a critical leadership platform and a sign of a manager of the future. And we're really looking to tackle the custodians of culture in most workplaces being men, and having them really lead on a topic that women have been leading on for so long, and have been having some great gains to date on making flexible working work for them. But if we're going to really have flexible working work for everybody, we need to tackle the group that have been both resistant to get on board, but have also had their flexible working requests denied at a significantly greater rate than women's, and that of course being men. And so the Equilibrium Man Challenge is a documentary series that's following the journey of 5 men as they look to work more flexibly. And rather than talking through this, I'm going to share with you a video of the campaign. If I can go back to, if I go back to the internet, hopefully you'll see that as I press play.
I do love my work, and once I've got a problem, I don't want to let go.
My customer base would be about our top 1,000 enterprise customers. Lots of things that can go right and wrong anytime.
I am wholly invested in progressing my volleyball career, wholly invested in doing my professional career, but I don't want to compromise in either. At the moment, the strategies I've got in place do both as hard and fast as I can until I fall over, and I'm worried it might not be the most sustainable strategy.
It's hard to have a sick day without feeling guilty or obliged to do that when you're genuinely sick.
I need to change, but I need to change pretty quickly. I think she's kind of fed up with it.
He needs to work less hours, whether they're flexible or not, but I don't think he's capable of doing that.
It's tough, you don't want to be the one that isn't working the afternoon because you're spending time with his family. You don't want to be that weak link.
I'm often in motion, and when I just settle, occasionally, that'll be good.
I am confident that I will strike the balance in time. I am confident of that. How I'll get there, I'm not so sure of.
God, I would love to be a house husband. The concept of playing tennis and golf and doing the washing and gardening sounds amazing.
We don't necessarily know what our role is in the family. So we're still, breadwinners and, hunter-gatherers and all those kind of things.
What you're dealing with now are enterprises that are across countries, across time zones, delivering work through virtual teams.
What I think is better than focusing on success is focusing on progress. This is where we actually value effort and input. It's where we value exploration and learning.
Yeah. We've certainly known now that people have been reinventing themselves at least 3 times during their career. So we're in a constant stage of taking care of my health, developing my technical knowledge, and basically refurbishing and renewing our professional careers, and they're the people we want to be teams.
So that'll just jump back to the presentation now. So that gives you a bit of a taste of the campaign that we've got in place to try and renew. Oops. Let me just. It's going to continue playing. Sorry. To try to renew workplace culture and really support employers as they embark on this journey to change the way that they work. For those that want to leverage the campaign, we have a Cheer Squad program where you can come on board and officially support the project. We're looking to wrap this first stage of the project up in February 2016, so there's still plenty of opportunity to access the content, and we have second episodes coming out imminently. So there's lots of great content on the Equilibrium Challenge website for you to access. And you can are encouraged to leverage the campaign content to support your own internal storytelling or run your own Equilibrium Man Challenge. So that was all I wanted to share, but happy to answer any other questions that might come through the Q&A.
Thanks for that, Yolanda. The Equilibrium Man Challenge definitely sounds very interesting. I also noticed that Dr. Jason Fox, who was actually one of the presenters at our recent national conference, was a part of the video, so that's great to see. If anyone needs further information on this Equilibrium Man Challenge, please get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with Yolanda and her team. So as I mentioned before, I also noticed that some people may have had some technical issues seeing that video that Yolanda showed. So I've just shared a link to that video on the chat box. So please click that just to see, have a look at that video later on. If you have any questions, I haven't seen any questions come through yet. So if you have any questions, please click on that hand or palm button on your screen, and I'll be able to unmute you. Sorry, I did notice that. As I mentioned before, there was a request to see that link Yolanda shared, so I've just shared it on the screen. I hope you get access to that. Do you have any other questions today? If you do, please type it on that chat box or raise your hand, please. Thank you. It sounds like we actually don't have any questions from the audience. So I'd just like to thank everyone. Oh, sorry, there's a question that popped up. Yes, there was also a request to get access to the slides today. We will definitely, both our presenters today have been really kind enough to allow us to share the slides as well as the recorded version of the webinar today. So we'll be more than happy to send you a copy of the slides from our webinar today, as well as give you access to the recorded sessions. We'll send that across to you in the next 2 days. And just to finish off with, I just wanted to know if anyone else had any questions or any comments to add to the requests that are coming through. It looks like we actually don't have any questions for today. So I'd just like to thank both of our presenters for your ongoing support for AWRA, as well as taking the time off your lunchtime today to share some interesting facts and statistics about flexible workplaces. And also thank you for everyone for joining in this afternoon. Again, as I mentioned before, if you need access to the presentations and if you haven't received it from us in the next 2 days, please let us know. Some of our emails could be going into your spam, so please let us know. We will definitely be sending them through. Just a quick note, our next lunchtime webinar is actually in October. Information on the dates and times will be available on our website from tomorrow onwards, and we'll be sharing more information on that on our social media as well. The next webinar will actually explore the cultural comparisons and implications of Japanese oil and gas company Inpex as its Australian HR team progressed a strategy of workforce diversity and inclusion at the $34 billion ICSIS LNG project in Northern Territory. So I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I look forward to having you join us at our next webinar in October as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adriana.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Yolanda.